there is a decision you already made that you keep reopening. Maybe it's a business decision, maybe something personal, but you've been through it like 10 times and you still don't feel like you can fully close it. And the more you think about it, the further clarity feels. I spent years living like that, not just big decisions, everything. And for a long time, I thought I just needed more clarity, more certainty, a better strategy. I had no idea what was actually happening inside my system. So, this video is about what I found when I went deeper. I want to warn you now, it goes further than mindset. I used to overthink everything, and I want to be specific about that because I don't mean just the big decisions. What I was going to wear, to eat, what movie to watch, every the time I would do something. Everything would carry this huge weight. And in my business, like the title of a content, an offer, strategy, an email, messaging, product features. So I would reopen the same decisions over and over again. Sometimes I would feel completely like certain about something. And then 2 days later, I would change direction completely. Even small decisions were having this emotional weight that made no sense for me at that time. I normalized all of it. I genuinely thought this was just what being a high achieving woman felt like. I thought being mentally exhausted all the time was normal. I thought constantly thinking about work meant that I was actually ambitious. I thought overworking meant commitment. Carrying the emotional weight of everyone around me was just maturity. I didn't realize that my system was chronically overloaded. I didn't realize how deeply disconnected I've been from myself. I literally created 5 fully produced products, one after the other. I filmed them, edit them, I built everything. And then I deleted all of them because I changed my mind again and again before even letting the decision breathe long enough to see if it would work. That is what happens when our system loses coherence. Every decision feels like life threatening. This cycle is exhausting in a very specific way. I remember reaching the end of the day feeling completely depleted, not because I've done meaningful work, but because I would spend so much energy just inside my own head, thinking, reprocessing, reopening, anticipating, worrying. Now I felt like I just didn't have time. But the lack of time was being created by overthinking loops themselves. It became physical too. So my body was constantly tense. My shoulders, my neck, my throat. It felt like my entire system was permanently bracing for something. Like worry became normal, guilty became normal, hypervigilance. And underneath all of it, there was this loneliness, this feeling of loneliness, not because I was actually alone, loneliness because I felt completely disconnected from my own truth, like I couldn't fully hear myself anymore. And that was the moment when I started realizing maybe this was never actually a clarity problem. When I started looking deeper into this, I realized something that I had not expected. When it comes to decision loops, I don't think women are only carrying the weight of their businesses. I think most women are carrying an invisible mental and emotional load constantly because it's so normalized. Most of us don't even realize how much energy it's consuming every single day. Think about it. If you have a partner, or if you have kids, or even if you simply grew up watching relationships around you, who is usually the one remembering everything? Who remembers the birthdays, the appointments, what needs to be bought in a supermarket, what needs to be fixed at home, what the kids need for school? Who keeps mentally tracking all these invisible details without anyone ever calling it work? And I want to be very clear here. This is not about demonizing men.
I genuinely think that most men have absolutely no fucking idea this dynamic is ever happening because they aren't conditioned to experience life like this. This is much bigger than individual relationships. This is historical, cultural, generational. We have ancestry imprint as women here. A pattern so many women inherited without choosing it and without ever realizing it was shaping how their nervous system learns to operate. Most women don't question it. We normalize being mentally on all the time. We normalize hyper responsibility. We normalize emotional monitoring. We normalize feeling responsible for how everyone around us feel, for the emotional atmosphere of every relationship, every family dynamic, every client interaction. We normalize carrying everything. And then we wonder, why we feel mentally exhausted when it's time to make an important decision. I'm not generalized here. I'm just giving you the most common context about being a woman that I observed and I lived by from my own experience. Mental vitality matters. If most of your energy is constantly being consumed by this invisible cognitive and emotional labor, of course, your system eventually becomes overloaded. Of course, decisions start feeling heavier than they should. Of course, clarity starts becoming harder to accept. I started noticing this pattern everywhere in relationships, in families, in women in business, in myself, especially in women entrepreneurs. When you own a business, the emotional becomes even heavier. You know that, right? You're not just carrying your own emotions anymore. You start carrying clients emotionally, your audience emotionally, your team emotionally. You became hyper aware of how people respond to you, how they perceive you, whether they approve of you, whether they are disappointed, whether that you are doing enough. And if you already have perfectionism, guilt, shame, or fear sitting underneath the surface, and let's be honest, most of us do, these are heavy ancestral imprints in so many women's lives. And then business amplifies all of it because now your visibility is tied to your nervous system. Your expression is tied to your nervous system. Your decisions are tied to your nervous system more than ever. Our businesses are mirrors. They're an extension of their founders. And this is why I think so many high achieving women secretly, and I really mean secretly, feel exhausted all the time, even when technically everything is working. Because externally, they might look successful, but internally, the system might never fully rest. Because when your system is overloaded, your clarity weakens. And when your clarity weakens, you start compensating by trying to think more. How many times? Just ask yourself, in how many situations you were thinking more to stop overthinking? I mean, it's crazy. More analysis, more information, more strategy, more validation, certainty. You watch more videos, you take another course, you consume more content. You try to intellectually force the clarity that your exhausted body cannot produce. But the more overloaded your system becomes, the harder it actually is to hear yourself again, your signal, your inner knowing. One of my biggest realizations in life, I wasn't overthinking because I lacked clarity. I was overthinking because my system was carrying too much noise. For years, I thought I had a clarity problem. I thought I needed better strategies. I needed more discipline, better planning, better execution. I thought I needed to become mentally stronger, more certain, more confident
in my decisions and everything. But eventually, I realized the problem was much deeper than mindset. My entire system had become overloaded with noise.
And let me explain what I mean by that, because understanding this completely changed my life. I call this the self alignment gap. The self alignment gap is the distance between your authentic self, your truth, your intuition, your higher intelligence, and the version of you currently operating through noise, through fear, conditioning, overloaded emotionally, hypervigilance, guilt, shame, pressure, the conditioning, all everything. I said that already, right? And the bigger this gap becomes, the harder it is to access clarity, because clarity is not something that you create. Clarity is something that you can hear when your system becomes coherent enough. And this is where I think so many women completely misunderstand what's happening to them, because most women are trying to solve overthinking through more thinking. I've tried everything: optimization, productivity hacks, you name it. But the more overloaded I became, the weaker my connection to myself became, the weaker was the gap, because I was living surrounded by disruptors. And I need you to understand the difference between disruptors and noise, because they're not the same thing. Disruptors are the things that actively are creating overload inside our system, and system, mind, body, your spirit. And noise is the accumulated effect of these disruptors that is left inside the system. So, examples: emotional suppression is a disruptor, information overload is a disruptor, constant comparison is a disruptor, overworking, addictive coping mechanism, hypervigilance, unhealthy foods. Yes, because food affects our body and mind so much. They all disruptors. Staying constantly stimulated is a disruptor. Relationships draining our energies are disruptors. Carrying emotional responsibility for everyone around you is a disruptor. And I had become extremely good at overriding myself. I would override exhaustion. I would feel my body screaming for rest and continuing working anyway. I would feel emotionally overwhelmed and pretending that I was completely fine. Women become really good at it. I would feel deep fear around a decision. And instead of sitting with that emotion, I would distract myself completely. Food, work, screens, completely random tasks. I remember moments where I would finally make a decision that actually felt deeply aligned. And then suddenly I would feel this strange urge to do something completely insignificant. I would decide I urgently needed to clean the house, or organizing something, or going to the supermarket at 8 p.m. to buy a snack. My nervous system was trying to escape the emotional weight of the decision sitting right in front of me.
Authentic decisions are confronting. They require visibility, responsibility, real change, exposure. And if your system is overloaded with noise, authenticity starts feeling unsafe. So instead of moving, you reopen the decision again and again and again. That's the loop right there. That's the loop. And the noise that accumulates inside the system, inside body, mind, spirit, after years of living with unresolved disruptors, it starts doing something very specific. It started distorting perception itself. So the noise, internal noise, becomes inflammation in the body, emotional heaviness, nervous system dysregulation, mental exhaustion, hyperactivity, compulsive thinking, a subconscious mind that is overloaded with unresolved emotional material that never properly process it. And once the noise becomes strong enough, your signal weakens. And by signal, I mean
your access to truth, your authentic inner knowing, your ability to feel something clearly without needing mental force, the mental certainty. Because signal feels completely different from noise. Signal feels calm, feels grounded. There's a space inside the signal. There's a kind of neutrality inside it. It doesn't scream at you, fear screams. Conditioning screams, hypervigilance screams. Signal doesn't. And eventually, the intellect starts compensating for this loss of signal. If I no longer trust my inner knowing consistently, then my mind is trying to create certainty in an artificial way. So now I need more proof. I need reassurance. I need external validation. I need more information. I need guarantees. I reopen decisions constantly. I seek more opinions. I overanalyze everything. I consume endlessly, trying to feel safe enough to move. But the more I overthink, the more noise I create. It's like a snowball. And the more noise I create, the weaker the signal becomes. And this is exactly why I created a deeper framework around signal recovery, because once I understood how decision loops actually form, I also understood something else. You cannot solve chronic overthinking only at the surface level. You cannot solve years of accumulated noise with another productivity hack, another strategy, or another mindset shift. So, signal recovery is the process I use to help women rebuild coherence step by step. And it happens in 6 stages. The first stage is reducing disruptors. So, because if your system is constantly being overloaded with new noise, the accumulation keeps happening faster than your body and mind can process. So, we start by identifying what is actively disrupting your signal: the overstimulation, the information overload, the emotional suppression, the hypervigilance, the addictive coping mechanisms, the relationship that are draining our energy. How are you supposed to hear your intuition clearly if your system never experienced silence? The second stage is processing accumulated noise, because reducing disruptors is not enough if the body is already carrying years of unresolved emotional weight. And this is exactly where so many women get stuck. They clean up some habits, they start meditating a little, but internally they're still carrying fear, guilt, shame. So this stage is specifically about processing what is already accumulated inside the system, what we tend to suppress and pretend that everything is fine. The third stage is strengthening the system. So, this is where we rebuild vitality, emotional vitality, nervous system, energetic capacity. Because when vitality is low, the perception changes in very specific ways. Decisions become heavier, fears become louder. We start by increasing the vitality at this stage, then to build self trust so the body can soften. The fourth stage is relearning signal. So, learning how your intuition actually manifests inside your specific system. So, this stage is about rebuilding sensitivity to truth again, recognizing how your authentic self actually communicates with you, recognizing what clarity feels like in your body. And the fifth stage is learning how to use signal in real life, in decisions again. We start slowly at first, in small decisions, then bigger ones. Because if you spend years disrupting yourself, you need to rebuild this trust through lived experience, through actually acting on your signal and seeing what happens, through training your system to stop automatically reopening, every single decision out of fear. And the last stage, the sixth stage, is learning how to act on signal consistently, because clarity without movement is not going to change anything in your life. This is where women stop living trapped between overthinking and hesitation. This is where they stop constantly seeking external reassurance and act. And maybe you're watching this right now while you are inside one of these loops. Maybe there's a decision you keep reopening. Maybe your nervous system feels exhausted. Or your mind feels so loud right now that you genuinely can't hear yourself.
So I crafted something practical for you today, a free decision reset protocol. And this is not the full signal recovery process. And it's not meant to replace the deeper work. It's a practical interruption tool for decision loops.
It includes a guided audio experience and a journal to help you regulate and identify your signal more clearly in the middle of a loop. So the download is in the description of this video. Go try and share with me in the comments how it was.
And I really want you to understand this. You are not supposed to force clarity endlessly. You are supposed to create enough coherence that clarity emerge naturally again because your signal is already inside you. It's always been there. And once you start reducing noise and restoring vitality, rebuilding self trust and reconnecting to yourself consistently, something shifts. And decisions stop feeling like life threatening. Your body softens, your mind quiets down, and you stop needing to control everything just to feel safe. And eventually you realize you stop overthinking when you stop overriding your truth.